Is this thing on?
I am Queens.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa, and you are listening to the All Things Pelvic podcast, where you get to follow my life as a pelvic floor physical therapist. That may sound a little boring, but real quick, let me break it down. I bring up topics that most people find difficult to talk about, but maybe it's time we get comfortable with discussing the uncomfortable. I always strive for real talk, good vibes, and mostly all things pelvic. Join me and my guests as we discuss healthcare, culture, and real life topics. Are you ready? Because it's time to take a page out of my playbook. Hi everyone, welcome back to another week of All Things Pelvic. I am super excited to introduce our guest today, and oddly enough, I've actually never met this guest in person. We've met on Instagram, which I think is kind of the beauty of social media, but Tara, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm Tara, so I'm like a physical therapist turned yogi. So
Yes.
I treated for about 5 years as a PT, and I specialized in pelvic health. And then about 2 years ago, I kind of saw this need of more specialized yoga type treatment for people dealing with chronic pain, chronic pelvic pain, and I kind of transitioned to now having a yoga based business. So that's kind of my story in like the nutshell version.
I was gonna say that was like super rapid fire minute version of your story. I love it. And honestly, guys, like one thing that intrigued me with Tara was just like the fact that she did transition. You know, I think a lot of us after going through like so much schooling, like we get kind of nervous with like, wait, like I went to, and I'm sure you may have had that battle a bit too with like, hold on, like I went to school for so long.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, do I really want to make that transition? But I honestly like I respect anybody who does it, you know, who does that, because you also have to do what makes you happy. You know, you always have to do what makes you happy. So what was it though, like about yoga for you that was just like this is a little bit more of the niche that I kind of want to get into?
So originally, when I was still treating as a physical therapist, I saw pretty much mostly pelvic health. And then I also had like chronic pain patients who didn't necessarily have pelvic issues, but for a certain number of my chronic pain patients and a certain number of people dealing with chronic pelvic conditions related more to pain, pelvic pain, I found that they kind of, some of them got like, I guess stuck, you would say. Like they definitely improved with PT, but they would still constantly have flares. And for this certain number of patients, usually the flares were related to like a stressful situation. So anytime they were stressed, their pelvic pain would flare up. So I always practiced yoga, more just like vinyasa yoga. Like I wasn't a super yogi like I am now. But I was like, okay, I mean, yoga is really great at like stress release. It helps to relax your body. And so I would recommend they do yoga. But what I found was there was really nowhere to send them to that was specific enough for what they were dealing with. Because even if they did a more beginner's class, a lot of it was too strengthening based. And it was just hard to find something that was appropriate for someone who's dealing with a lot of physical type pain.
For sure.
So I decided, so at that point I was like, okay, I really do love yoga. Let me do my yoga teacher training and I'll just add this into like my physical therapy treatment and that. So then I did my teacher training and it was really so transformational for me personally. And I don't personally suffer from chronic pain, but I had a lot of mental health things that I was dealing with, and it like really changed like my life, and I didn't know how powerful it could be. And I was like, I really feel like I need to dedicate myself to this, and I think I can serve this population. Honestly, which what Alyssa was saying, it was really hard to actually give up like actually treating as a physical therapist, even though it's like I'm still using my knowledge. It was really hard to be like, okay, I'm not like treating as a PT, even though I went to school for 7 years for this, but I felt like I could really serve this population in a better way by being the person that could provide them with this type of yoga therapy and having my physical therapist brain, and I understand what they're going through and making it more specific to them. So that's like the long version of like how I got to where I am today and how I actually stopped treating as a PT, which I never thought would happen, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, part of me doesn't even know how to follow up with that because of everything you just said. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is one thing that stuck out that you said is that it did help you transition in a way too, especially if you were going through something mentally. I definitely feel that a lot of times, even though like of course boundaries are super important, but I think that when we can also help a patient or a client in a way where like maybe we've gone through something similar, I think that is always really helpful for them to kind of know. Now, even with you, like maybe sending your patients somewhere, to like do yoga and practice yoga, sometimes it is hard because it's like, I'm sure this happens to you all the time too, where it's like a patient will then say like, actually though, like, do you do it? Because like you already know my body, you know my body already. And it's sometimes really hard to then like explain to now a whole new person like what's going on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, I think it's awesome. I think it just goes to show to how many different things just goes into patient care, right? That just goes into patient care in general. And you found that kind of like, you liked that vibe way more better than like just PT, right? Even though you were probably doing all of those things while you were doing just PT too.
Yeah, so a lot of pelvic PTs are really in tune with mind-body connection. And
definitely.
We know that pain is more than just physical. Like as physical therapists, most of us understand that and work with it, but I think you work with it on a certain level, and like with yoga I feel like I'm able to like work with it on a much deeper level.
1000%.
So,
And just so anybody listening, like if you're not sure like what a pelvic floor session can entail, I even tell my friends who are more ortho based, and like I'm an orthopedic PT as well, but it's like there's such a difference between a chronic pelvic pain patient in comparison to a sprained ankle. To be like, there's just such a big difference. There really is a huge mental component to it. And I never like to say that like one is worse than the other, because like somebody with ankle stability, like clearly there's a mental component there too, like with, just being nervous about wearing a certain type of shoe or whatever it is. But
for sure,
with pelvic pain, it's so understudied right now too. And now I feel like we're getting into a groove where it's like, okay, clearly this is more of an issue than maybe we have thought in the past. So like now there's a little bit more research on it, but like in general, there's not. So it's like when I tell my patients sometimes that like it could be stress, they're like, you gotta be kidding me. Like we're all already like stressed out about stuff. But I have a patient who I was seeing for it was a few months, but it was the type of thing where he would get better right after a session, and then it would come right back. Like his pain level would just like spike right back up. And I was like, listen, and he was like, I've been to psychologists, I've been to the works, and like nothing is working. And I was like, have you also been to like the right people though? Because like, going to psychologist is like dating. Like if it's not the right person, it's not the right person. Sure. Same thing with PTs and stuff. It's like if it's not working, it's not working. So oddly enough, he took a huge break from like PT, which I think it was like one of the best things for him. We actually spoke about it before he did it, and it. And because I even said, I was like, I'm also cringing with like treating you, knowing that you are also gonna like, just spike right back up to that pain level that you usually are at. And this was also months of like trying different things and like working with a million different things. And he emailed me recently, actually. And now this is about a year ago, maybe, that I treated him. He did hypnotherapy, and he said that 90% of his pain is gone. And he was amazing. And he was like, it was a really big struggle for me to also understand that like this was way more of a mental component than it was physical, even though it was manifesting as physical. So
I think it's a hard thing sometimes to like, I guess, accept. And I think it's like people, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but
no,
like,
no,
I think we need to like realize that physical and mental are so closely related that there's nothing wrong with the fact that maybe the mental is more of the issue. And I think that's like something that people have a hard time dealing with. But I mean, it sounds like for your patient, it was probably, I'm guessing, were you doing a lot of like muscle release with him?
1000%.
Yeah.
Because like
so
that
he physically had muscle tightness and would feel better after. So that was a physical problem, but then his mental or emotional state or stress or whatever it was just bringing his muscles back into that, state. So he needed something else, which, some people get the luxury of going to PT and they're just like, better, we're done.
Like, I'm good to go. Yeah, no, exactly. So it's like, that's why I also think it's so important to also just educate. Like, we might not be experts in the field of like diets or, like nutrition or whatever it is, but it's like, at the same time, I still bring it up in my session. So it's like, let me at least help you get to the resources that you need. So even like yoga for me, like, sure, do I like maybe like prescribe like certain yoga poses, but like, I'm not truly into like the practice of yoga. Like I wouldn't be able to teach a class. Like I wouldn't be able to do that. So I feel like also knowing those types of things and knowing that there are these providers out there is like super important. So yeah,
for sure.
Well, I know. So you're still doing like PT, but it's more yoga based. So like, what would a typical session look like with that? And like, how does that differ from like, I guess like a typical, PT session?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, so my style of teaching yoga is it's like a combo of different things. Like, I wouldn't say I teach like one specific like path, because there's a lot of different like paths of yoga and some people are like super specific, but my style, so I do vinyasa yoga, which is more that movement based with breath work, but for most of my clients, it's a really more gentle focused, like more gentle movements, really just focusing on moving with the breath. It's not like these intense, like, poses where you're like holding warrior two for like, a full minute or something. Like, it's like really toned down. So usually a session will include some type of movement based practice. And then I also incorporate some type of like restorative. So that's a lot when you use props and it's more passive for your body. So it's a really good way to relax the body, like using bolsters, yoga blocks, and putting your body in positions that maybe would help like open and release things, but it's more of a passive thing. And then I also will add in some type of meditation practice, depending where the person's at, maybe more focused breath work. But yeah, I always incorporate some type of meditation into a session, because that's really where we could get into like the mind space, quieting the mind, and really like kind of going inward and assessing what we actually need, that maybe we had been avoiding. But usually my sessions would start with more the movement based kind of stuff, because I think when you start with that also, it helps you, like if you're someone who has a hard time meditating, doing more the movement-based practice and then maybe doing some restorative, it's kind of like preparing your body and mind to meditate if you're not someone who could just like sit down, close your eyes, and like be good to go.
I'm
so
literally
kind of like
no, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just literally in my head being like, I just started meditating, and it's so funny because like that is what I kind of need to do. Like I need to like move around a little bit beforehand to like get my mind ready for it, and like then I can do it. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, keep going. So you
well, no, like on your point, like if anyone has done like a typical vinyasa yoga class that's more movement based, and you do shavasana at the end, like a lot of times people maybe like if you had them lay in shavasana at the beginning of the class, people would be like, oh my God, I like can't sit here with my eyes closed. But because you just went through all those movements, and they're, it's moving your body and working on strengthening, stretching, but the way we kind of move through yoga poses, it's also more intentional, like working with our energy and things like that. So it's like literally preparing you to like be able to relax and be in that state. So usually if someone has a hard time, like you were saying, doing that movement, then you can actually sit and, close your eyes and be okay. Like, going inside. But meditation can be hard for people, for sure. It's not easy. Like, it seems like it should be easy to just close your eyes and sit there, but it's definitely not.
Right. So, okay, real talk. Let's talk about that for a second. So I like one of my friends is a health coach, and she's been helping me a bit with like trying to kind of like calm my body down. I'm definitely an animated person. A lot of people know this about me. And I realize though that even like when I'm getting PT, when I'm even just like when I'm supposed to be a little bit more calm, there's some part of my body that's just always gripping, no matter what. So it's like, as a PT, I'm also trying to just like learn how to calm down my own body. I teach it all the time, and I'm trying to calm down my own body. But what I learned about myself for meditation is that like what she taught me is to like try not to completely close off your mind, which that was different for me. That was different to hear that. I was like, okay, that's interesting, because I feel like everybody says you need to close off your mind completely. She goes, unfortunately, you're going to have thoughts, especially with like just starting meditation, like you're going to be in the zone trying so hard to, grasp what's going on. But she was like, if you think about something, then just like say, okay, that's a thought, and now like put it away.
Exactly.
And I thought that was very interesting, because I had never heard it like put that way. And then she said something like, of course, with a kind of a personality like that too, you're always going to want to focus on something. So like focus on your breathing and like add movement into it. Like, let's maybe put your hands on your ribs and like try to expand them as, back and forth, and like kind of do it in that way. So you're still paying attention to something, but you're also still super relaxing your body. So I definitely wanted to get like your thoughts on that. Like, how do you feel about like that kind of approach to it?
So, I mean, the point of like the long-term goal of meditation, is to be able to quiet your mind. But, pretty much no one probably could just sit there and their mind is going to quiet right away. So it's more about like, it's always like, they say like more in the mental health standpoint, if you're trying not to think of something, you're going to think of it. So if you're like, I'm trying not to have thoughts, like thoughts are going to come up. So it's more about just like you were saying, you notice the thoughts, and the point is you don't want to like chase it, I guess, and you don't want to like run with it. So you just notice it, it's there. Okay, moving on, bring your attention back to whatever it was that you were focusing on. So like you were saying, if it's your breath you're focusing on, if you're doing more movement, mantra can be really helpful for people who have a really, really active mind. So some type of phrase that you're kind of repeating, and you don't have to say it out loud. You could literally like say it in your head. That usually is like a really, really helpful way for people to stay focused. So that's like another tool that sometimes I use with people. And a mantra could be like, it's so vast, like you can pick whatever you want.
And it could be like anything too, which I think is so cool. I definitely think for me, I'm sure it's also all about like preference, like I have a friend who genuinely just like wakes up each morning and does this, like just kind of sits there. And like, that's how he meditates. And I'm like, no way. I was like, no way. I just genuinely, and also this is me kind of already putting out the idea that I can't do it, without even like kind of truly trying it. However, I have definitely done like more of a guided meditation where it's like drop your shoulders and then like repeat this in your head, and, kind of like over and over. And like that is definitely more of my vibe. Because then I could be real in tune with that too. So.
And it can like evolve over time. Like I used to pretty much only do guided meditations, and now I pretty much just I just sit with music and I just like feel into my own energy. Like that's how I like to meditate, but like it's definitely like evolved over time. So you have to like find what works for you, and then it might change as you go. So
totally,
that's the beauty of it.
What would you, like if you were to give somebody advice onto like how to get into meditation, like what would you say to them?
I mean, personally, out of everything we've talked about, I really do think doing a guided meditation for 5 minutes is like really the easiest place to start. Because one, it's only 5 minutes, like you could do it.
We can all take 5 minutes,
and then,
that's
like,
for sure.
If you're someone that is like, you have a lot of, wandering thoughts or whatever, and you're having a hard time sitting there, someone is talking you through what to do. So they're giving you something to focus on. They're cueing something in your body. So that really is the best way, I think. And then also for people who are dealing with pain, I know meditation can be hard sometimes because it's hard for them to sit still, depending on what you're dealing with. Some people have a hard time sitting in one position for a while. So just knowing that really, like, you can meditate in any position. Like, you don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor to meditate. Like, that's not true. You can sit up in a chair, you can lay down, and it kind of is like a journey too of finding what position works best for you that you can actually sit there for. So, you know, your first meditation, maybe you are fidgeting and you're like, okay, like this time next time I'm going to put a bolster under my hips. Let me see if I feel better. So it's kind of like figuring out what works for your body, because ideally you do want to be able to be still, because if you are fidgeting around, it's kind of like breaking that trance of meditation. Yes. So that's like a super important thing when you're starting your journey, is to work on finding that position. And it can take time. Like, I think it took me like, I don't know, it probably took me like a good month of like moving around to find, because I just like personally enjoy sitting on the floor, but I did have like some discomfort. So it took me a long time of finding, okay, like, how do I need to prop up my hips? Like, what can I put under my feet so they feel better? So just like, you know, go with it.
Yeah.
It'll take time, you know, don't worry.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think that's like, those are like my suggestions. So doing guided meditations only for like 5 minutes. Don't like try to make yourself sit there for like 20 minutes the first few times you're trying to meditate, and working on trying to find a comfortable position. I think those are like good ways to start your practice.
Totally. I mean, I think that I've had so many patients be like, nope, can't do it. And I'm like, well, when you did it, like, did you try to do it for like an hour? Because like, that's super tough to do right away, you know? So it's like, I think that, I mean, a big trend, at least in New York, especially just like downstate New Yorkers, New York City, Long Island. Like, I think we're just so like on the go all the time that it's a really hard concept. And just Americans actually in general, I think it's just culture. It's like, it's really hard concept for us to just like chill for a second.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. I mean, this is like a little off topic, but one of my friends and I were talking about, we listened to this anti-diet podcast. It was very interesting how they said that Americans, like, I forgot what percentage it was, but like 60% of people don't enjoy their food. Because whereas like I think they did it in France and then in England, where it's like 90% of them, like, it doesn't impact their day. Like, it doesn't impact their day. So that to me too was just kind of like, that I'm kind of not surprised about. You know, like, I'm not surprised about it, because we're just like we're always on the go, maybe eating as we're talking on the phone and like running to the next place and like doing all these things, and then maybe feeling bad about it because it wasn't like the healthiest meal that maybe I just had or something. There's just like always something. But I think that's so cool that that's like more of a bigger vibe into your sessions. I mean, a PT session could be so different for like all of our specialties that we all have. And I mean, definitely for pelvic, it's like, we definitely want to go on the route of like more calm. That's for sure. No matter what. But it just makes me think of like some of my friends who were more of like in a sports and like ortho vibe, where it's like a little way more just kind of intense. So like for somebody to be more in tune is interesting.
Always interesting. I think like what you were saying is we all have like masculine and feminine energy. Like, it doesn't matter of gender. We all have it. And most of us in like America have a lot of masculine energy where we're up and constantly needing to go. And it's like tuning into that feminine energy of being able to like rest and relax and take time for you, and even sitting down for 5 minutes and eating.
Definitely. I know, it's so interesting. I something just pops into my head about like meditation and kind of just like your sessions in general. I know you and we've kind of talked about like the emotional component, you know, into physical, of course, but like, have you ever had anybody kind of like, as they're meditating or as they're going through their poses, like in your sessions, like, does their pain ever just like really increase at all? Like, are they manifesting it so much that does it kind of make its way just like back in for a second too, for them to, am I making sense?
I mean, a lot of it's like in the sessions, it's down regulating. So I've never had anyone that has had like a huge spike, like in pain. Like if you're moving through poses, obviously, like it's kind of like sometimes like trial and error in a way and seeing like what can your body tolerate. But sometimes like I would say it's more of like an emotional release that I would see.
Yeah.
More than like a spike in pain. It's like more of like a really like intense rise in emotions. And a lot of times like that can happen in like when you're doing like hip openers and working on hip openers, which is, you know, a lot related to more pelvic related stuff. But if we're looking at more of like the energy and our emotions in our body, we really store a lot of it in our hips. And it's like not uncommon that like you might have like an emotional release while you're doing like a hip opener, like if you're like sitting in it for a long time. And it's kind of like interesting because like I didn't really know that until I did like my yoga teacher training. And I remember I was like talking with my mom about it. And me and her used to like go to Kundalini yoga, like we did it a while ago. And she's like, that's so weird. She's like, that literally happened to me once in class. She's like, we were sitting in pigeon pose. And she's like, I just wanted to start crying.
Yeah.
And she like didn't tell me then, but I was like, now it makes sense.
Right.
So yeah. So, and if that does happen, like going with it can be like really like it sucks when it's happening, but like when you go with it, it can be like really therapeutic and healing after. But yeah, so.
I know. So I've had this happen a few times where like somebody's pain level weirdly would like increase, and it's more so because they're just like noticing it more, and then things like completely calm down. But I've always found, I don't know, that like relationship between like pain and even just manifesting it, I've always found that so interesting how like if we do kind of manifest pain, like it can happen. Or like if you persevere on it like a little too much. I always find that really, really interesting how we have those kind of brain connections into there.
Yeah, I mean anything that, unfortunately, like the pain is there, but just the more you're like constantly focusing on it, it's just like constantly creating it and making it be there more often. You know, it's like reminding your brain like, oh yeah, it's there. Like where's my pain today? Oh, there it is. Like it's like you're constantly thinking about it. So it really does like feed into the cycle. It's like not easy by any means at all to like start to break up that cycle, because it's not, the pain is real and it really might be a physical component as well, but the brain just like gets used to thinking about it and it's like constantly like re-manifesting it in the body. So it is really interesting like how much power our minds like we have the power for good and for things that are maybe not as ideal. Like it goes both ways, but it's definitely fascinating.
Always. There's always something.
Yeah.
It's always a double-edged sword. Like no matter what. And I mean, I think like even just brain connection, that can be like a whole episode in itself about how we like manifest all of that. But if you were to pick like your favorite yoga poses, top 3. What are your top 3?
My top 3. Well, I really like yogi squat malasana for like grounding. So that's like when you're in a deeper squat and like the hands are kind of in prayer.
Oh yes.
And there's ways you can modify too. Like that's not comfortable, like with blocks or stuff under the heels. Like I do really like that one. I really do like pigeon pose for like hip opening. Yeah. Because I do find that one is physically beneficial, but also very like emotionally beneficial. My last yoga pose, probably child's pose, but I do also find it. It's really good at like just the way that like you're relaxing, like having that head like in contact with the earth. Mm-hmm. It's really good at like helping kind of like quiet it if you could actually like tune into that like sensation. So I think those are my top 3 favorite off the top.
Definitely. And it's funny, I just realized I didn't give you like even something to associate it with. I didn't say like chronic pain or anything like that.
Just in general.
Yeah, for sure. But no, it made me just realize too, I'm like, no, like those are my favorite just in general too. Like child's pose is definitely like, I think like my top. Like for some reason, I just think like, it's just overall, just there's a lot of modifications. There's a lot, there's just a lot you can do with it. So definitely one of my favorites. But I feel like I need a book with you now. I've been like thinking about it. I'm like, I need to like go into pigeon pose way more often.
Oh my God, you're so funny.
But with that being said, where can everybody find you? How would they go about booking a session with you and all of that?
So you guys can find me at Dr. Tara Salay on pretty much all platforms. So my website is drtarasalay.com, and then I'm Dr. Tara Salay on YouTube and on Instagram. And if you guys are interested in booking a session, I do offer like a free consultation. So we can kind of talk about it and see, if it's the right fit for you. And I can kind of talk about how I can help you, and you can book that on my website. And hopefully coming forward in the future, I am going to have like more of a self-paced course out for using yoga to help heal from chronic pain. So stay tuned.
Yay! Oh, that's so exciting. And as always, I'm gonna put all the information in the description of the episode and everything, but that's super exciting. I think that anything virtual is and self-paced is so the way to go right now, and just in general for both ends, for patients, for clients, and then for you too, to just be here's my module, go for it. So I love that. And I think that's super exciting. And
I'm excited about it.
and it was such a pleasure talking to you. I just want to thank you for being on here today.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the All Things Pelvic Pod. Have questions, concerns, comments? Want to share your story? Remember to follow me on Instagram at _pelvic floor playbook. DM me, share my stuff, like it, and let me know what you think. As a reminder, this is not medical advice by any means, so don't be out here doing a bunch of nonsense in these streets. If you need me and want a vibe, you know where to find me. I'm out.